Oh, look at that handsome guy.
Look at that, Kieran with a jacket and tie.
Wow,
Oh,
he
yeah.
looks so serious, right?
Very good.
I don't know why it didn't default to video.
Now we get to real Kieran.
Yeah,
now you
we liked
can't
your
see-
stately picture.
Now you
You
can't see my my cat here
Oh,
who's loving on me. I'll give you just a little preview of him.
oh,
John's got Snoopy.
Yeah.
it's very good.
I'll show you my butterflies instead. There you go.
Very nice. So welcome everybody that's joining us. And we'll get started in a little bit. We're glad you're here.
I see we are at 30, 31.
It'll climb.
Hope so.
So when John and I met earlier today to do a quick run through, I was sitting out on my front porch, happy camper, 60, 61 degrees. It's my kind of December weather right there.
Saving on the fuel bill.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
I've heard that somewhere.
Who needs Hawaii?
Who needs a why?
Hawaii.
Hawaii. That's right.
Yeah.
Just come to New Jersey and bask in our balmy December weather. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. Given the
Clark
choice.
said hello.
Hello.
So I did see that Clark sent us a nice email that he was able to join us because he doesn't need to spend 2 hours in a happy hour.
Wait, he chose this over happy hour? Clark, what's wrong with you?
Hey, Lori, Thomas Austrian has asked you a question. Did you see the questions that he sent you?
Nope, I will look at them when I stop sharing my screen and you take over. Then I'll go into the chat and take care of whatever questions they may have, unless it's pressing that something I need to pop on and do right now. No? Okay.
He
No
said,
problem.
okay, thanks.
Okay. Yep, I'll talk to him in just a moment. So does everybody have their hot chocolate or wine or, yeah, I ended up with water. I might pop out and get hot chocolate with whipped cream and cinnamon on top. So,
Oh my.
oh, it's really good.
Oh,
If you
do
haven't
that, you gotta
tried,
share.
well, I'll try. You can watch me drink it. That's about all I can do.
She could pour it onto her computer, I guess.
I
I'm not
could
sure
do that.
how much good that'll do us, but
Yeah, that might end the webinar. So I think we should get started. Yes,
Okay.
let's do it.
We got a hand up. Hold on a second.
that was the wrong button.
First off, I want to welcome, we have some woodland stewards out there, and I want to thank you for joining us. And tonight, you want to go ahead, Lori?
Yep.
We'll get started.
Okay, yeah, so I stopped sharing my screen so you can share yours when you're ready. And again, we're just thrilled to have you here tonight, even though you're still up in New York with Snoopy and a nice little Christmas tree behind you. Actually, 2 Snoopies, I can see both now. But we have to congratulate John, actually, because he is now officially graduated from college with his Bachelor of Science degree. So congratulations, super excited for you. And yay. And let's get started. Andy, any other words before we begin?
I just want to remind everybody that John Hooven is our speaker tonight. Besides having just gotten his forestry degree, John is a member of the board of directors of the New Jersey Forestry Association, and he is the facilitator for the backyard forestry program. I'm sorry, the Woodland Stewards program that we hold every year. So John has been very much involved in forestry in New Jersey, and we welcome him tonight to give us some more of his expertise.
Thank you. And we'll get started. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation of Backyard Forestry online. I'm John Hooven, member of the Board of Directors in New Jersey Forestry Association, and a recent graduate, as they said, from SUNY ESF with my Bachelor of Science degree in Forest Ecosystem Science. Tonight we'll be presenting on holiday greenery and traditions. We did give this program once before, a few years ago, back in Jackson at the Forest Resource Education Center in Jackson, where we actually had a short presentation and we actually did holiday wreaths. For the second part of that presentation, of course, you'll have to use your imagination unless you brought your own greenery. But we'll go ahead and get started. So, hey, history of the season. The first thing we want to go over is the history of the first holiday special, which was Charles Schulz in 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas, and the first holiday tree, and the best holiday special ever. Now, of course, you know, I'm completely lying on all of this. I figured I had to throw all this in there because it's my favorite and most inspiring of Christmas traditions. And yes, I am biased. Thank you very much, Snoopy. So, history of the seasons. Since the dawn of human civilization, mankind has celebrated the winter solstice, the beginning of winter and the shortest day of the year. And let's see if you can see my pointer. I'm pointing down here to the winter solstice, the shortest day or the longest night of the year. Winter begins this year, next Tuesday, December 21st at 10:58 a.m. in the north. Of course, on this day, daylight starts to increase once again as the sun climbs higher in the sky each day, returning warmth and solar energy for growing crops. And of course, this was very much a very tenuous time of year for our forefathers or the ancestors that came before us. Many civilizations would celebrate the return of longer days with celebrations centered around plants and the harvest. Here we have a picture, of course, of Stonehenge in Wiltshire, England. Of course, one of the reasons that they believed they needed to do this is because if they didn't, they figured that the sun wouldn't come back and warmer days and growing season wouldn't return either. This became a bit of a problem, so most of our holiday traditions can be traced back to before the Common Era in Northern Europe. And again, as agrarian-based societies, farming and the harvest were important for sustaining our society. Ensuring the harvest was critical. Our earliest farming methods translated into later scientific discovery and research. In lieu of that, our agrarian ancestors paid homage to and worshiped the forces and superior beings that they assumed had control over growing conditions, such as the weather, climate, and pest. Once again, our holiday traditions come from many ancient pre-Christian civilizations, including the Druids, Romans, the Norse, Celtic, Germanic, Scandinavian, among others. Many winter solstice celebrations were tied to the harvest and growing of crops. As Christianity spread throughout Europe, many of these previous pagan traditions were adopted or adapted to be aligned with church beliefs. And of course, this is true because of the spread of the Roman Empire throughout Europe. And subsequently to that, the Holy Roman Empire, which came after it. We have the old Yule tradition. And here you see there's a woman here in the picture who is actually celebrating the old-fashioned way that they would have done centuries and centuries ago by giving offerings of traditional harvest, and you see she's holding wheat in her left hand there. And we go over the Yule log. Yule, or Jule, is an ancient Northern European and Scandinavian celebration of the winter solstice. As a result of this celebration, an entire tree would be brought into the house and burned in the hearth for over 12 days. As the tree burned, it would be fed into the hearth to keep the fire going. Now, if you can imagine, you must have had a pretty large doorway to get a tree that big into your house and keep it going for 12 days. In more modern times, an entire tree would be selected, felled, and chopped up to burn over the 12-day celebration. And here we have a picture around the turn of the century of them chopping up a rather large tree with a rather primitive, old-fashioned, I'll say chainsaw, but I don't know that that's actually a chain that they're using. It's more of some sort of, I'll assume that's gasoline powered, but I really couldn't tell from this picture. Probably converted from an old car engine. And of course, we have today's Yule log, courtesy of the Food Network. Today's Yule log can be made at home or even picked up locally at your favorite supermarket or bake shop. Admittedly, Yule logs of old had much fewer calories, but probably were not quite as tasty. Most greenery comes from evergreen trees that are also used for Christmas trees. Garland of holly and fir were used in the Victorian period. Greeks and Romans adorned tables with centerpiece bowls filled with fruit and plant clippings, including laurel. Pagan beliefs were to bring evergreen boughs into the home to protect home and restore life. The evergreens were thought to be godlike. Indian story is of a great spirit who asked all the trees to keep their leaves to protect the forest. But one by one, the trees lost their leaves. Only some pine trees, spruce and firs and cedars were able to do what the Great Spirit had asked. They were rewarded for their dedication, but became forever green. Even Christians believed the evergreen represented a renewal of life in the darkest time of the year. Advent and the Christmas wreaths were adopted by the Lutherans in the 16th century. Swags may date back much further. Of evergreens were brought into the house. Of course, you see the swag there on the right on your screen. Wreaths originally adorned the Christmas tree. The wreaths were left over and made up from trimming of the tree. They represented the Advent celebration leading up to Christmas Eve and the birth of Christ. But harvest wreaths were used year-round by many civilizations, going back to ancient times in Europe and Greece. Wreaths were originally made of wheat or harvested plants, adorned and assembled with red and white wool threads. Martin Luther is credited with decorating the first Christmas tree. Let me correct that. Not the first Christmas tree. Martin Luther was credited with tree decoration. Luther was walking at the night in the snow of a starlight night, pondering the birth of Christ among the evergreens. Inspired, a tree was cut, brought indoors, and adorned with candles. And here we have a depiction of what it must have been like. If you can imagine, that was probably a very much of a fire hazard. Some of the research I had done actually indicated that there were some restrictions that were set on how big of a tree in France you could actually purchase back in the day, because they didn't want to have a fire hazard in the city. Bringing evergreens or greenery into the house dates back to pre-Christian holiday celebrations. Apples were hung on the tree as ornaments or decorations. Paper flowers and nuts, along with lighted candles, were used to decorate the trees. Today, the Christmas or holiday tree is the centerpiece of many homes, businesses, and office holiday celebrations. Romans themselves did not bring trees into the house. They would actually decorate the trees that were outside. And here we can see different types of trees that we have today, as opposed to the original traditional trees. A white tree that we see, of course, adorned in lights, a blue tree, and, well, what looks like a pretty sad tree. And of course, the traditional Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And of course, the non-traditional saguaro cactus tree. And of course, the cat-proof tree. The cat-proof tree will enable any cat from not being able to knock the walls off the tree because it's hung upside down, suspended from the ceiling. And of course, if you have an incorrigible cat who refuses to cooperate, you can always turn them into a tree. The first Christmas tree farm was located right here in the Garden State. It was planted in 1901. And there were many trees that were sold in New Jersey tree farms. They sell about 70,000 New Jersey grown Christmas trees a year. But the first tree farm in New Jersey was actually started again in 1901, and it was W.V. McGalliard. He planted 25,000 Norway spruce trees on his farm. The first one that was harvested was 1908. Teddy Roosevelt, the same year, tried to stop the practice of harvesting Christmas trees out of concern for the destruction of forest. His sons enlisted Gifford Pinchot to persuade the president otherwise. In the 1930s, President Franklin Roosevelt started a Christmas tree farm on his estate at Hart Park in New York. And here we have, I believe this is the Exley Tree Farm in New Jersey. And here we have the most common species of trees that are used as Christmas trees. Virginia pine is actually quite surprising. We had Dr. Mark Vodak, who was the extension forester for Rutgers Cooperative Extension, who actually expressed that Virginia pine was actually one of his favorites. I actually found that quite surprising, seeing as how if you see native Virginia pine growing in the forest, it's actually quite sparse. But I understand that when you cut it and trim it right as a Christmas tree, it actually fills out quite nicely. Eastern red cedar is another one that is quite a surprise, but if you see it as you start watching it grow, it really does take on a nice pyramidal shape and fills out quite nicely. I don't know many people in New Jersey that are using Eastern red cedar as Christmas trees. I think that's more of a Southern tradition. Start a holiday family tradition of your own and cut your own tree. There are many New Jersey Christmas tree farms that allow you to cut your own tree, or they'll cut it for you. You can visit the New Jersey Christmas Tree Association at njchristmastrees.org. Or if you're planning on a visit to a national forest, you can get a permit to cut your own tree down. Visit www.recreation.gov/tree-permits. Unfortunately, I did check that before the presentation tonight, and I think the closest national forest that would be available to us is in Vermont or West Virginia, I believe. But that's still a pretty decent drive for anybody here in New Jersey with everything that you have going on, I'm sure. Sears also started to sell artificial trees in 1883. 33 limbs were made available for 50 cents and 55 limbs for $1. That was quite a bargain back in the day. The holly and the ivy, if you're familiar with the hymn, holly trees come in male and female. But before scientists discovered this, it was believed that holly would not produce berries without ivy, and thus the association between the two. The modern hymn actually dates back to the 19th century. A previous version dates back to pagan times. So once again, it was a matter of repurposing a pagan tradition to fall in line with Christian values and purpose. Going back to Christmas trees, between 25 and 30 million trees are sold each year today in the US. Almost all come from Christmas tree plantations. Fresh trees are completely recyclable and get turned into mulch. Many family farms rely on growing sale of Christmas trees as income. A note here about native plants, because we are going to be discussing some native plants that can be used for greenery. It is illegal to collect plants and greenery from public parks and forests. If you can imagine everybody watching this presentation who would decide all of a sudden that they want to go out and collect their own greens from a park, that can be quite devastating. You may be able to seek permission from private landowners to collect materials for decorating. I myself have some 4 acres down in New Jersey pinelands, and I have a hedgerow of holly out front that the berries get nice and ripe at this time of the year and can be available for cuttings. I am unfortunately not in New Jersey, so I wouldn't be able to make them available right now. But it is, if you find a landowner who's willing to cooperate with you, many native greens can be made available. I also know of some retailers, including a large home improvement retailer who sells Christmas trees, who makes the trimmings available for free. If you go into their garden center, you'll usually see a bin next to where they cut the Christmas trees filled with free greenery. Deck the Halls was a Wales song that dates back to the 16th century. Church records dating back to the Middle Ages documented purchases of holly and ivy for holiday celebrations. The use of holly predates Christian traditions. It's associated with the Roman god Saturn and used in celebration of Feast of Sol Invictus, which happens to fall on December 25th. And here we have a picture of our native holly, Ilex opaca. A deciduous member of the holly family is winterberry holly. The berries remain on the plant through the winter and are an important source for birds for food. It grows in swamps and wetlands. The berries, though, are toxic to humans, and its scientific name is Alex verticulata. Wintergreen and cranberry are subshrubs that grow in New Jersey forest and the pine barrens. The berries remain on the plant through the winter. And actually this year, I have actually seen Gaultheria, I'm going to screw this up and I totally apologize, but Gaultheria procumens. Yeah, you say that real fast. Wintergreen, right there in the center of your screen. I've seen it grown retail, sold retail, and the berries actually are quite huge. There's actually also a natural version of it that grows in the woods that's variegated and shows both a striping in the leaves, two colors in the leaves. On the right, of course, you have Vaccinum macrocarpum, and that's the American cranberry that grows here native in bogs, especially in the pine barrens. Mountain laurel is another native evergreen that we have growing in our forest. Laurel has been used to make wreaths for thousands of years. It symbolizes success and victory. Generally poisonous to animals, and it's one of the reasons that deer won't touch it. Also, I understand that it also has a tendency to be very flammable. That is, if it's in the forest, people will, down in the pine barrens, will want to trim it back. They don't want too much of it because of the nature of its flammability. Can actually act as a good ladder fuel. And there's a lot of it right now that grows down there because, once again, the deer won't touch it. So you'll have a lot of land lots down there that actually will be filled up in the forest with mountain laurel. Mistletoe is another native. Actually, the tradition of mistletoe actually goes back to Europe, but we do have a native mistletoe that grows in our woods. It is a semi-parasitic evergreen shrub, excuse me. Its sticky berries land on the tree limbs. It's rare in New Jersey due to overharvesting, but its preferred host tree is actually sour or black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. The Druids believed the mistletoe had mystical powers. The plant was cut at the winter solstice in elaborate ceremonies. Mistletoe was hung in the home to ward off evil spirits. Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman writer, documented a ritual where 2 bulls were sacrificed and mistletoe was used to cure infidelity. Infertility. My apologies. Once again, here we have a picture of our native mistletoe, Phorhodendron species. The easiest thing to do is you'll see it growing out in the woods at this time of the year because it'll be the only green shrub that's hanging up in the trees. When I first saw it and saw this picture in my own neighborhood down in southern New Jersey, I thought that a shrub had blown off into the wind and got stuck up top in the top of the tree, but actually it was mistletoe, and it was very a unique find, and it was actually quite exciting for me to find it. There's stories I've read in newspapers that people will try to harvest it by shooting shotguns in the air at it. I don't recommend that. That's a very dangerous practice because you never know where the pellets are going to wind up falling down. This is not the same as dwarf mistletoe. Dwarf mistletoe is a parasitic plant that can kill Western conifers. Next, we go on to another tradition that's not greenery, but a fungi. And of course, you knew we had to cover that since I was just finishing a class in mycology. Here we have mushrooms, in particular, not this mushroom that you see. This one actually looks like a bolete, but in particular, the fly agaric mushroom, which is poisonous and hallucinogenic, typically would be found growing underneath the spruce and fir around the time of the solstice. I'd like you to consider all mushrooms in the wild poisonous unless you know better, or unless, of course, you have a professional with you who knows enough about identifying mushrooms to let you know that they're not, the ones you're considering are not poisonous. Otherwise, for the safety of yourself, consider all mushrooms poisonous. One of the things that we went over in my mycology class was the extent of mushroom poisonings, and that alone will be enough to scare you straight. The most dangerous, of course, being Amanita, and Amanita has a tendency to go in and destroy the mRNA in your cells that actually creates proteins, and your cells die. It's that simple. The problem is that it'll take 7 to 14 days to realize that you have the poisoning, and by then it's too late to treat it. Fly agaric, of course, though, would give the consumer of the mushroom red rosy cheeks as well as hallucinations. And here we have fly agaric, Amanita muscaria. As we said before, Amanita as a genus has many poisonous species, including Amanita muscaria. Amanita mushrooms are responsible for 95% of mushroom fatalities. Amatoxins cause cells to stop producing proteins, as I said before. The cells die, eventually leading to organ failure and death. There is no antidote. Amanita poisoning takes many days to start showing symptoms. This latent period is one of the reasons for its fatalities. But here's an interesting side fact about fly agaric. There's a striking similarity to the colors of fly agaric and Santa Claus. And the tradition of boiling down and eating fly agaric actually falls into the northern reaches of the Nordic and Scandinavian countries where Santa Claus originate from. So maybe reindeer really do fly. And there's also a striking similarity between Santa and Jack Stewart, retired regional forester, New Jersey State Forest Service, and member board of directors of New Jersey Forestry Association. I'm sure Jack would not appreciate that if he saw me finish that, but there it goes.
Hey, John, I'm just
Yeah.
letting you know this is being recorded. You better believe I'm going to let him see this. So that was awesome.
Thank you,
All right.
Lori.
You're welcome. I will mute myself now.
Okay. This was an interesting fact that I came across when I first did this presentation back in 2018. The poinsettia. You can see I have some back. Well, when we go back live, I'll show you again. I have a couple in my room. Joel Poinsett was the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico. He introduced the poinsettia to the U.S. in 1825. Paul Eck is credited with the first potted poinsettias for holiday use in 1923. The poinsettia is actually a subtropical shrub that is planted as a shrub in Florida. I knew of a woman who lived down there, and she actually had a whole front yard of poinsettias that were in bloom year-round. But again, it is planted as a shrub in Florida, so you will actually see it more as a big bush than the traditional flowers with the red flowers on top that you're used to seeing. Poinsettias today also come in many different colors. In addition to the red and pink that are on the screen, you can get them in white and many different shades of reds that I've seen lately. We also have the Christmas cactus. The Christmas cactus is the genus Schlumbergera. It's found in the mountains of Brazil. Schlumbergera is a small genus of cacti that flowers in May in the southern hemisphere, right before the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. The cultivars fall into two main groups: truncata, with pointed leaves, and more commonly called Thanksgiving cactus, and the buckleya, with rounded leaf that flower later, that we now know as the common Christmas cactus. In their native habitat, the plants grow on trees or rocks in the shade with areas of high humidity. They are generally different in their appearance than their desert cousins. The plants were first brought to Europe in 1818. By 1852, the hybrid buckleya was created by a botanist by the name of Buckley, by the way. The crossing and breeding of cultivars continued to the turn of the century, but many earlier cultivars were lost. Christmas cacti saw a renewed interest in the 1950s, and new cultivars were bred. Today, Christmas and Thanksgiving cacti come in many different colors. A similar plant, the genus Halteria, let me try that one more time, folks. Halteria. My apologies, because that's the first time I've ever said that word out loud. Is grown and sold as Easter cactus. Schlumbergera is an easy to care for houseplant that grows slow and needs little water and care. They can be damaged both by overwatering and underwatering. They do not tolerate direct sunlight. Keep that in mind, and you don't want to put it near heater vents as well. But otherwise, they're a very easy to care for plant. So as we come to a conclusion of the program, I'm going to go over some traditional greenery decoration. Of course, we have wreaths and garland, swags, and centerpieces, as well as arrangements. And these can all be made with greenery that you can find from Christmas trees. I always thought a good idea would be to go to a Christmas tree farm and buy a relatively inexpensive Christmas tree, take it home and use the cuttings so that way you can make wreaths. You may want to sell them to your friends or give them as gifts. And of course, most of these, if you don't have a friend who's a tree farmer or a Christmas tree farmer, you can find available at your local garden center. And that's about all we have there. And do we have any questions? We have a lot of stuff going on in the chat right now, don't we?
Yep. Yeah, catch up on all that, but it's there are two questions. By the way, this was great. This was great. So I'm going to try to step out and show you my cinnamon poinsettia. Goes with the cinnamon I put on my hot chocolate. It's
very nice.
Actually stunning. So I'll try to pop out and get that. I meant to bring it over earlier. But yeah, they're some beautiful colors these days. They have ones with speckles on them and just a whole arrangement's pretty cool. So questions. Now, this is a serious question actually from Thomas. He's noticed that hemlocks and spruces mostly have lots of cones this fall, but pines, particularly white pines, have no cones or very, very few. Is that like a normal cycle? You know, do they have alternate production years, or for some reason has this just been a very poor year for pines? Does anybody know the answer to that?
I would
Kieran or
say
John?
that, yeah, I would say, and Kieran can jump in on this too. I don't have this much experience in it, but my understanding is that they do take alternate years to grow. I know Norway spruce that grows in front of my house takes a couple of years to grow. It's actually one season for the new buds to bloom, and then the next season for the cones to grow. So they do take a bit of time, and I imagine that they're the same for the pines. I'd have to look into that. I can get a better answer for you if you want me to respond. I can get your information and respond to you. But that's what my understanding is.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I can give you his email, and we can, or I can even, I like the references that you had at the end. I'm wondering if maybe when I can send this recording to everybody, and maybe we can add those references and any other information that we might have. So we can do that when I send it out to the people that registered. So, so before we go to the next question, one of the things I was going to say is if anybody that's on the webinar tonight has any really cool ideas for how they decorate or how they use greens that they get from either their Christmas tree or whatnot, be interested, because I have not decorated yet. So if anybody wants to come over to help, or B, if there's any other really cool ideas. I know sometimes I'll try to find boxwood garland. It's not always easy to find, but boy, it's gorgeous when you have boxwood garland. So, so second question is, some years back, there was a push to have a living Christmas tree rather than cutting one, you know, that whole don't cut the trees. Then after the holiday, of course, you plant that tree in your yard. Does anybody know the ratio of live trees to cut trees today? And so how many of those 25 to 30 million that we buy, I guess that's a year, right, are actually live, like ones that you can plant?
I would go on a guess here that 25 to 30 million is the cut number, not the live number. Because that figure came from, I believe it was the American Christmas Tree Association. And as far as the ratio is concerned, I am not aware. I don't know that anybody will be aware of that. That's basically a difference of the Christmas tree farmers versus the nurseries. So the nurseries would be selling live trees, although I imagine there's some Christmas tree farms that would actually do dig and burlap wrap also. But no, I don't believe that that's a number that we would have readily available. I will say though, that, you know, with regard to the push to having a live Christmas tree rather than a cut one, that the Christmas tree farms that actually grow them are actually in the business to actually cut the trees and replant them. So they'll go through, I believe, an entire crop of trees or a field of trees in 10 to 12 years. And after they're cut, of course, what they do is they replant and start all over again. So it's just a sustainable business that just keeps going and going. And again, a lot of them get chopped up in the mulch, but they also have some repurposing that I've seen done with zoos. They let the animals play with them, and they can use them as bedding and all different types of things along those sorts. So,
yep, definitely. And interesting is that if people are may know that there's this year, last year, and probably the next couple of years, there's going to be somewhat of a shortage of trees, or they're certainly a lot more expensive this year than they have been. And does anybody know why there is that shortage? John, you mentioned 10, 12 years ago. What happened like 10, 12 years ago? Recession, right?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
would say.
it's wild.
And there was
Yep.
probably less that were planted,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, there's just less trees today as a result.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
What's interesting is I used to work for CSX Intermodal, and we would be getting bills of lading from Issaquah, Washington, for Christmas trees that were being cut back in August, that were being shipped through Puerto Rico to come up to the Eastern Seaboard. So that's how far some of those trees would come from. It's a really big business. There's
Yes.
a lot of people that are in it and getting live trees. I'm sorry, cut trees.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Nothing like a cut tree. So Heather has a comment. I want to read this. So she says she has a spice drop gumdrop tree with red, green, and white spice drops. Artificial, but fun, really fun. She's also a Christmas tree grower, and we make roping with excess. That's really
there
cool.
you go.
Yep. And adding silk dogwood for natural red color works great. That's some really, really cool ideas. Good stuff.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, that's good. What my town does with, after the holiday, people put there's a day or whatever, or time where you're supposed to put your undecorated tree out on the curb, and they go around and they collect them all. And then usually the end of January, we have a big open field. It's owned by the fire company, which is a good thing because we have a huge bonfire with all the Christmas trees. It's a, everybody gathers, more hot chocolate, always a good thing. And I think in years past, they've created a little skating rink, just put some water down to freeze and stuff. And so it's just a whole big kind of townwide event. So repurposing in a good way.
I don't know if they're going to be able to do the ice rink this year, though.
Yeah, I know, 60 degrees, probably not. We'll be drinking iced tea instead of hot chocolate.
You know what's interesting in the research that I was doing I have to confess that I was updating this up to the last minute today, on the heels of preparing we were actually supposed to do a moss presentation this evening that I was supposed to present, and I had to fall back onto this presentation simply because I had studying to do for my finals. And well, anyway, getting back to what I was saying originally, doing the research that I was doing this afternoon, I came across the first documented decorated Christmas tree was back in the 1500s. And the two gentlemen that after they were done with the tree, they put a rose on it to adorn and pay homage to the Virgin Mary. And then after that, they burned the tree down.
Whoa.
I thought that was an interesting little side, it's like, so it wasn't even saved, for, the historic reasons or anything like that. It was, not that it would have been anyway, it was a live tree, but I just thought it was rather funny that, the same night they decorated it, they went and torched it. So
wow.
that was quite interesting. So
that
kind
is
of like
very
falls in line with what you were saying, Lori, about the bonfire. Very interesting.
Yeah, makes for a nice fire for sure.
I was going to say maybe an old tradition there, more of a tradition there than that needs to be explored.
Yeah,
of
for
course,
sure.
I wouldn't recommend that. You probably need a burn permit for sure. So
yeah, that's why I mentioned that it was on our fire company's property. So we're well protected with that whole thing. That's pretty cool. So, and that whole thing that you were talking about with the Christmas trees when they were first decorated, that brought in the house with candles put on them. I mean,
that was nuts.
Are you kidding? I mean, I get it. We didn't have electricity back then, but wow, that's definitely risky. I mean, I don't even leave my lights on my Christmas tree if I'm not home,
Yeah.
Candles. Yeah.
Thank
different.
you, Clark.
So Kieran had his cat
Yes.
decorated.
And I was listening earlier, but I couldn't respond. I don't have a good answer to the cone question. I'd have to just look it up, but I know there are certainly some trees that alternate fruiting years. So white pines could be one of them.
Mhm. That's great. So Kieran, do you have issues with kitties and trees? Christmas
You
trees?
mean
holiday
does
trees?
my cat go after my tree? Is that what you're asking me?
Pretty much.
No, what he does is he tries to drink the water
Yeah.
at the base of it. He likes that sweet Christmas juice. So I have to like try to keep him away from that. But no, he doesn't really go after the tree. He doesn't really go after any plants. So every once in a while he'll go to a leaf and he'll kind of go like this to it, like he'll chomp on it without actually biting a piece off. He just likes the feeling of putting holes in things.
There you go.
No, he doesn't. He leaves them alone. Even if I put ornaments on there, he leaves them alone.
Wow. It's a good kitty.
Lori,
Yeah, he's good except when he's not.
do you go through the chat? Kevin had a question about attendance for backyard forestry and LTEs.
Yep. Answered already.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right.
I have to go back and
Mhm.
give him a certificate for participation. So that's no problem. We answered Thomas's questions as best
You
as we
just asked
could.
if poinsettias are allergic or toxic to pets. The answer is yes. They are definitely toxic to pets, or at least to cats. I guess I don't really know the answer for dogs, but
I've heard, I'm hearing mixed things. I will side on the side of caution and also say, agree that they're toxic. But I have heard somebody saying otherwise on the radio, but again, I don't know if that's hearsay or what, so I'll stick with what I've heard previously, that they are toxic. I actually have, oh yeah, so the two I have here in my room, I have them because I don't have pets or cats around, so
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about it. The other, getting back to cats, I have a cat story that would decorate my tree down in New Jersey in my house. And at night, I would go to bed and I'd have to scold the cat, telling it not to go after the balls on the tree. And the next morning, I'd find 7 or 8 balls that were knocked off the tree, that it would decide to get up into the tree and use as toys. And we would just go through it every single day, put them back up. He would take them back down. It got to a point where I actually went to Target and actually found they had these little tiny indestructible Christmas balls that we got him a whole box of them for Christmas one year. And we just threw them on the bottom of the tree so he could just go to town and do them. So that was pretty fun. So he absolutely loved that.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So
I
there's a couple more questions about poinsettias, and there's a great website because it was actually just National Poinsettia Day on December 12th. Who knew, right? And the interesting thing is that it's that date because that's when the guy, hold on a second, the Paul Eck guy that you were talking about,
Yes.
that's when he died. So that's why
Oh, wow.
that's why that's National Poinsettia Day,
Wow.
which is kind of interesting. So the question Tom was asking is, what were poinsettias called before Jack Poinsett was the ambassador, and were they already an ornamental plant in Mexico? And they were. There's a website that gives you a lot of good information on the history and even the care of poinsettias. It's called poinsettiaday.com. And I can throw that in the chat in a little bit, poinsettiaday.com.
That's
So
a really
then,
good question too. I like that because in my research, I didn't come across anything, and that's a good question because it begs to wonder if he found it as he was walking along and just grabbed it out of the woods, or if it was already being used as some sort of ornamental down there when he found out about it.
So I can answer that question actually. So what we call the poinsettia is native to Mexico and was called, boy, talk about messing this one up. I'm going to put it in the chat. It's Spanish, Tlaxcachil, and it was named, and I will put that in the chat, by the Aztecs. And the name signified flower that winters, mortal flower that perishes like all that is pure. That's in quotes.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah, and that's not
Yeah.
Spanish, that's a native Aztec language.
Okay, yeah, probably, yeah, there you go. So Quexa, whatever, was cultivated as a gift from the gods, and Montezuma adorned his palaces with the plant. So it has a lot of history. So I have a question for people because, so, you know, we talked about the beautiful red and the white, and in my case, cinnamon and all that kind of stuff. Who knows whether those are the flowers or what they are actually called?
I would assume that they're bracts.
Yeah, you're right. You got it. The flowers are actually the little tiny buds that are almost in the center of the bracts. So the beautiful red is not actually the flower.
That's very interesting, Paul. I was just reading Paul's comment. They took cuttings from the yard, pine, cedar, and holly, and made decorations for the State Historic Park at Batstow Village. Swags on some doors and small or on the porch lights. That's pretty cool.
Beautiful.
If you have any pictures, I'd be interested in seeing them. I'd like to put them into this month's newsletter for New Jersey Woodland Stewards, which all of a sudden I realize I got to start working on.
Okay, and I have to head out for a second because I've been asked to show you my cinnamon poinsettia. So I will.
Yes, please show us that. Sounds great.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have any? I think we had something else some years back. I saw that one.
I think it's
Oh, that was
pretty
okay.
current.
Yeah, Lori's going to grab Lori's going to grab the cinnamon poinsettia. Anybody else who has any questions or comments, just feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A. I hope you all enjoyed this evening's presentation. Oh, look at that. Wow.
Wow.
All I can say is thank goodness I watered it, because boy, if you don't water them, they go real fast, you know.
Yeah, they're very dramatic.
Very dramatic. They come right back, of course, but yeah, very dramatic. So this is what is called cinnamon. I believe it is a new color this year. And again, you can see the
Yeah, the little tiny
flowers, bracts. Yeah. So yeah, it's beautiful. This was given to me as a gift. There's a place in Thoroughfare, for those that are down that direction, called Michael William Florist. He's a nursery as well. So there's your cinnamon poinsettia.
Very good. That's beautiful, by the way, Lori.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yep. Hey, I've decorated now, right? I'm good to go. I have my poinsettia. Well, so John, you mentioned before that we are going to cover moss next month, correct?
Yes.
I'm very much excited about that because, you know, you heard my moss story earlier today. So I'm very much excited to hear about moss and uses and all that kind of stuff. So we'll send out a little description of what we'll be talking about, open up registration, definitely by early January. And hopefully everybody will.
Expect a longer presentation on moss because I have an awful lot to cover. What I learned over the course of the semester, and I'll have to try to break that down in layman's terms for everybody and go over it in about 75 minutes.
Okay, there is another question.
Yeah, from
And
Nancy.
sometimes the
She's-
suckers that come out are all white. I was told that it's a virus.
I think it's more of a comment than a question, but I don't know if it's a virus or not. I'll trust whatever Nancy was told on that, unless John has an answer, but I think John may have frozen.
We should take a picture of John's frozenness. It's quite impressive.
I grabbed all my cat's hats, but he saw me coming and ran away before I could put any more on him.
So what would he have worn? What do you have?
Well, I put the Santa hat on him, so I was also going to use he has a beanie.
Oh, cool.
He has a scarf. And then of course he has the watermelon.
Yes, gotta have a watermelon hat. I love it.
Necessary. He has other
Well-
stuff too, but those are all my Christmas cat decorations. He's like my tree, like John would say.
There you go. I love it. All right, well, I think that wraps up our backyard forestry for December. Super excited to share some of this great information with people and get in the holiday spirit, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all good. So I would like to wish everybody a happy holidays, and I look forward to seeing everybody again in January. Any other parting words, Andy or Kieran?
No,
And then
everybody
John?
enjoy the holidays and, let's have a great 2022.
Sounds good.
John, we were just signing off.
Oh, okay. Apologize, everybody. I was just about to send you a message. The wind's picking up here and apparently my connection went kaput. So.
Well, thank you. This was really great. This was great information and exciting and interesting. And I'm saying it got us in the holiday spirit. So that's really
Good.
neat.
Yeah.
So
I hope
Thank
you
you, John.
enjoyed it all. I tried my best to try to get as much more information in there as I could. And I know we didn't make 90 minutes, but you know, I think we hit the halfway point. So 50%
Yep.
is better than, you know.
Yep. Hey, it's
They're not,
quality,
so.
it's quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
For sure. All right.
Well,
So I think we
I-
can sign off and we'll
Happy
see
holidays,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you. So we'll see everybody in January for a presentation on moss and look forward to seeing you then. All right.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.